Let me ask you something honest. When was the last time you made a decision? A real decision, without first imagining what someone else might think about it. Maybe you turned down a promotion because you were afraid people would say you were getting too big for your boots. Maybe you stayed in a relationship long past its expiration date because you didn't want the family drama that comes with leaving. Maybe you've got a business idea sitting in a notebook on your nightstand, and it's been there for 3 years, collecting dust, because somewhere in the back of your mind, you keep hearing a voice that says, "What if they laugh at me?" If any of that hit close to home, you are not alone. Not even a little bit. Here's the truth that nobody puts on a motivational poster. Most of us are not living our own lives. We are performing them. We wake up every morning, put on the version of ourselves that we think the world wants to see, and spend the next 16 hours trying to make sure nobody disapproves of us. That is exhausting. And the worst part? We've been doing it for so long we don't even notice anymore. Today, that changes. We are going to go deep. We're going to talk about where this need for approval actually comes from, why it has such a grip on us, and most importantly, what you can do right now to start living a life that belongs to you. Not your parents, not your boss, not some stranger scrolling through your Instagram. You. So let's start at the beginning. To understand why we care so much about what other people think, we have to go back. Way back. Not just to your childhood, but to our origins as a species. For most of human history, being part of a group was not optional. It was survival. If you got kicked out of your tribe 10,000 years ago, you didn't just feel bad about it. You died. Alone, in the cold, with no food and no protection. The brain learned, very quickly, that rejection equals danger. And that lesson got wired so deep into our nervous system that it's still running today, even though the stakes are completely different. Nobody is going to leave you out in the wilderness because you wore the wrong outfit to work. But your brain doesn't always know that. When you feel the sting of someone's disapproval, or the anxiety of possibly being judged, that is your ancient survival brain firing off an alarm. It's saying, danger, danger, group rejection incoming, and your whole body responds like it's a life or death situation. Because once upon a time, it was. Understanding this changes everything. It means the fear you feel is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's actually a sign that your brain is working exactly the way it was designed to. The problem is just that the design is outdated. You are running ancient software on a modern life, and it's creating a lot of bugs. Now layer on top of that what happened to you growing up. From the moment you were born, you started learning what was acceptable and what wasn't. When you did something that made your parents smile, you got warmth and approval. When you did something they didn't like, you got correction, maybe punishment, maybe just the withdrawal of that warmth. You learned fast. Do what gets the approval. Avoid what gets the disapproval. Then you went to school. And the same dynamic played out with teachers, with classmates, with the whole social hierarchy of the lunchroom. Every kid who ever got laughed at for raising their hand in class carries that memory somewhere. Every person who got mocked for their clothes, their weight, their interests, their voice, their accent, they learned to shrink. They learned to hide the parts of themselves that might invite criticism. By the time most of us reach adulthood, we have spent nearly 2 decades in a system that rewards conformity and punishes difference. Is it any wonder we struggle to break out of it? Here is what approval seeking actually costs you. And I want you to really sit with this. First, it costs you time. Every hour you spend worrying about what someone thinks, replaying a conversation in your head, adjusting your behavior to manage someone else's perception of you, that is time you are not spending building something you actually care about. Not an hour here and there. We're talking about years of your life. Decades, for some people. Second, it costs you your identity. When you spend long enough performing the version of yourself you think the world wants, you start to lose track of who you actually are underneath all of that. You forget what you genuinely like Because you've been curating your personality for so long, you forget what you actually want. Because you've been managing expectations for so long, you look in the mirror and you recognize the face, but you're not sure you know the person. Third, and this one is the hardest to hear, it costs you your relationships. Real, deep, genuine connection requires you to show up as yourself. But if you're always performing, always filtering, always managing the image you project, nobody actually gets to know you. They get to know the character you play, and that is a lonelier way to live than being alone. Think about the friendships or relationships in your life that feel the most draining. I would be willing to bet that a big part of why they're draining is because you don't feel like you can be yourself in them. You're always on guard, always performing. That is not connection. That is a long-running audition for a role you never really wanted in the first place. And then there's regret, the slow, quiet kind that builds up over years, not the loud kind where you did something dramatic and paid the price. The quiet kind where you look back and realize that you had a dream and you let it fade because you were afraid of what people might say. You had a shot at something real, and you didn't take it because you needed everybody to be okay with it first, and they never all were. And so, you just didn't. Regret is heavier than failure. Failure you can learn from. Regret just sits there. Let's get specific for a minute, because this stuff gets real sneaky. Whose voice is in your head right now? When you imagine someone disapproving of you, who is the face that comes up? For some people, it's a parent. Maybe a critical father who never thought anything you did was quite good enough. Maybe a mother whose love always felt conditional, tied to performance, tied to meeting a certain standard. For others, it's a peer. That one person in high school who made you feel small. That colleague who undermines you in meetings. That sibling who always has a comment about your choices. And for a growing number of people, it's the faceless crowd of social media. The comment section, the like count, the subtle, constant performance of your life for an audience you've never met, who you will never meet, and whose opinions genuinely have no bearing on your actual existence. Here's something worth sitting with. The people whose opinions you are most afraid of are, in most cases, not thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. Research in social psychology has a name for this. It's called the spotlight effect. We tend to believe that other people are paying much closer attention to us than they actually are, because from inside our own heads, we are always the star of the show. But everybody else is the star of their own show too. They're busy managing their own fears, their own insecurities, their own inner critics. The amount of mental real estate you occupy in most people's minds is a fraction of what you imagine. The critic whose voice haunts you, they've moved on. You're still carrying the weight of a judgment they made in passing and forgot about 5 minutes later. You are paying rent on property that was abandoned years ago. Now I want you to do something. Think about someone whose opinion you've been worried about recently, and ask yourself this question honestly. If this person's life were laid out in front of me, would I actually want to trade places with them? Would I want their relationships, their career, their inner life, their peace of mind? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. And that tells you something important. The person whose approval you're chasing is not living a life you would choose for yourself. So why are you letting their opinion of your life carry so much weight? Here's one of the most useful ideas I can hand you today. And once you understand it, it will genuinely change how you process criticism. When someone judges you harshly, they are not holding up a mirror to who you are. They are holding up a mirror to who they are. Every opinion a person has about you is filtered through the lens of their own experience, their own fears, their own history, their own unresolved stuff. A person who grew up in scarcity will see your ambition as reckless. A person who gave up on their own dreams will see yours as naive. A person who is deeply unhappy in their relationship will find a way to criticize yours. This This is not because there is something wrong with you. It is because perception is projection. When someone tells you that your idea will never work, what are they actually saying? They might be saying, I tried something like that once and it didn't work for me, and I haven't made peace with that yet. When someone tells you that you're being selfish for prioritizing your own needs, what are they actually saying? They might be saying, I was never allowed to prioritize my own needs, and watching you do it makes me uncomfortable. This doesn't mean you should dismiss all feedback. Not every critical voice is a projection. Sometimes people who care about you will tell you hard truths that you need to hear. The difference is this: criticism from someone who is genuinely invested in your growth is specific, constructive, and delivered with care. Judgment from someone who is projecting their own unresolved stuff is vague, harsh, and tends to be aimed at who you are, rather than what you did. Learn to tell the difference. Welcome the first kind. Let the second kind go. Okay. We've talked about the problem. We've talked about where it comes from. Now, let's talk about what you actually do about it. The antidote to seeking external validation is learning to validate yourself. And I want to be clear. This is a skill. It is a muscle. And like any muscle, it gets stronger the more you use it. And it atrophies when you neglect it. Most of us never developed this muscle because nobody taught us how. We were taught to look outward for confirmation that we were okay. We were never really taught to look inward. So, here is where we start. The first practice is a daily self-check-in. At the end of each day, before you check your phone, before you scroll, before you do anything else, take 5 minutes to sit with one question. How do I feel about how I showed up today? Not how did other people react to how I showed up? How do I feel about it? This is harder than it sounds. Your brain will immediately want to redirect you to external data. Did they respond well? Did they seem to approve? What did the comments say? Bring it back. How do you feel? Did your actions today align with who you actually want to be? That's the only score that matters. The second practice is getting very clear on your values. Most people who are stuck in approval-seeking mode have never actually sat down and defined what they value most. So they default to other people's values, other people's definitions of success, stability, achievement, worthiness. Take a piece of paper and write down 5 values that are non-negotiable for you. They might be things like honesty, creativity, freedom, connection, growth, integrity, adventure. Whatever they are, they need to be genuinely yours, not borrowed. Once you have that list, use it as a filter. Before you make a decision, before you compromise yourself for someone else's comfort, ask, does this align with my values? That question will do more to anchor you than almost anything else. The third practice is what I call the 10-year test. When you're caught up in the fear of what someone thinks right now, ask yourself, will this judgment matter to me in 10 years? In most cases, the answer is an obvious no. The opinion of a coworker about a project you presented, the disapproval of an acquaintance about a choice you made, the comment section's reaction to something you shared. In 10 years, in 5 years, in 1 year, none of that will have any bearing on your life. But the choice you made in response to that fear, that might matter a great deal. One thing that comes up a lot when people start working on this is the idea of boundaries. And I want to address it carefully, because the word gets misused a lot. Setting a boundary is not about shutting people out. It's not about becoming cold or cutting off everyone who challenges you. A boundary is simply a line you draw around your own mental and emotional space. It says, this far and no further, not because I don't care about you, but because I care about myself. Think of it this way. If someone walked into your home and started rearranging your furniture without asking, you would say something. That is your space. You get to decide what goes in it and where it sits. Your mind is the same way. Your peace of mind is your home. and not everyone gets unrestricted access to it. In practical terms, this might look like deciding not to share your goals with certain people until you've made enough progress that their doubt can't derail you. It might look like limiting how much time you spend with someone who consistently makes you feel small. It might look like choosing not to explain your decisions to people who aren't genuinely invested in your well-being. You don't owe everyone an explanation for your life. None of this is hostile. It's just maintenance. It's how you protect the mental space you need to stay clear, stay focused, and keep moving in the direction that actually matters to you. I want to spend a few minutes on something that most people don't want to hear, but that might be the single most liberating idea in this entire conversation. You cannot live authentically and be universally liked. It is not possible. The two things are mutually exclusive. When you start showing up as yourself, when you start setting boundaries, when you start making decisions based on your own values rather than other people's expectations, some people are not going to be happy about it. And I'm not just talking about strangers. I'm talking about people who are close to you, people you love, people whose approval you have been managing your entire life. When you change, it disrupts the dynamic. People who were comfortable with the version of you that was easy to manage and eager to please will not always be comfortable with the version of you that has a voice, has limits, and knows what they want. That discomfort in other people is not a sign that you've done something wrong. It is often a sign that you've done something right. The Japanese philosopher Ichiro Kishimi wrote about what he called the courage to be disliked. The idea is this: freedom, real freedom, is not possible without the willingness to be disliked. As long as you need everyone's approval, you will always be hostage to whoever is most likely to withhold it. The moment you accept that not everyone will approve of you, and that this is okay, and that your life can still be full and meaningful and good without universal approval, that is the moment you become truly free. This doesn't mean being reckless. It doesn't mean being inconsiderate or burning bridges for no reason. It means being honest. It means showing up as who you actually are and letting people respond to that, rather than performing a version of yourself that you think they'll accept and then resenting them for only liking the performance. The people who are meant to be in your life will show up for the real you. They might not be the people who've been there the longest, but they'll be the people who stay. Let's talk about fear for a minute, because fear is the engine behind all of this. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen and found wanting. These are not small fears. They are, for a lot of people, the central organizing force of their lives. Every decision made through the lens of avoiding these fears. Every path chosen because it felt safer, less exposed, less likely to invite criticism. Here's what I want you to understand. Fear is not going away. That is not the goal. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. Every person you admire for their boldness, their authenticity, their willingness to take risks, they feel fear too. They feel it right up until they act. And sometimes, even after. The difference is not that they somehow bypassed the fear. The difference is that they didn't let the fear be the final word. Think about the things in your life that you most want to do but haven't done yet. The business you want to start. The relationship you want to end or begin. The creative project you want to pursue. The conversation you need to have. Now think about what is actually stopping you. Is it a practical obstacle? A lack of resources, time, information? Or is it fear? For most people, if they're honest, it's fear. And under the fear, if you dig down deep enough, is almost always the same thing. What will people think? Here is a reframe that I want you to try. Instead of asking, what will people think if I do this? Ask yourself, what will I think of myself if I don't? Because you are the one who has to live with the answer to that question. You are the one who will remember, 10 years from now, what you chose when you were standing at the edge of something real. The regret of inaction is almost always more painful than the sting of someone's disapproval. Disapproval fades. The memory of the life you didn't live doesn't. We're coming to the end of our time together, and I want to leave you with something that you can carry with you. Everything we've talked about today, the origin of approval seeking, the cost of living for other people, the mirror principle, self-validation, boundaries, the courage to be disliked, turning fear into fuel, all of it points to a single truth. Your life belongs to you. It sounds obvious, but most of us are not living like it's true. We are renting out our lives, piece by piece, to other people's opinions, other people's expectations, other people's comfort. And somewhere along the way, we started to believe that this was just how things were, that caring this much about what other people think was just a personality trait, an unchangeable feature of who we are. It's not. It's a habit, and habits can be broken. The version of you that makes decisions based on your own values, that shows up authentically in relationships, that pursues the things that actually matter to you, that sets boundaries without guilt and lets go of approval without falling apart. That version of you is not some ideal future self. It is who you already are underneath all the conditioning. It is the person who was there before the world taught you to perform. Getting back to that person is not a one-time event. It's a practice. It's a daily choice. Some days you'll get it right, and some days you'll catch yourself shrinking again, performing again, seeking approval again. That's okay. That's human. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. The goal is catching yourself faster, returning to yourself more easily. And Karaman, 12 Fake. With Karen, here's what I want you to do before you finish this video and go back to your day. Pick one area of your life where you know you've been living for someone else. One decision you've been putting off because you're afraid of what people will think. One boundary you've been failing to set because you don't want the conflict. One version of yourself you've been holding back because you're not sure how it will be received. Now ask yourself this: what would I do in that area of my life if I genuinely did not care what anyone thought? Don't answer with what you think you should say. Answer with what's actually true. Because that answer, that honest, slightly uncomfortable, maybe even exciting answer, that is the direction of your freedom. Your life is not a performance for an audience that isn't paying as much attention as you think. It is yours. One life. Finite time. Real stakes. Live it like it belongs to you, because it does.